Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. It is great to be back. I was away last week in San Diego, but here I am back. And today my guest is Michael. Is it pronounced Granado or Granado?
Granado, yes.
Granado. Okay, very good, very good. And Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, yeah. So I am first and foremost an educator. I've been teaching for roughly the past 10 years at both a high school and a college level. I teach history, philosophy, and humanities, broadly construed. Um, I have a YouTube channel where I make quote unquote educational content. I like to review ideas, misconceptions about history and philosophy, and occasionally I've been known to debate an apologist or two, but
Hmm.
yeah, that's me.
Okay, very good, very good. Yeah, I went and I listened to one of the conversations on your channel, and if you are not subscribed to Michael, please go subscribe, and there is a link in the description to go and subscribe there. My one complaint would be that the titles are not very um, catchy. I
Mm.
looked at this one thing title. It said "Conversation between Ben Shapiro and Sam Harris," and I said, well, that sounds interesting, and I listened to it and said, "This is a lot more interesting than the title led me to believe."
I'm not a very creative person. Titles are difficult for me. Yeah.
I totally get that. I don't know why it is, but for me, titles come to me at 5 o'clock in the morning when I'm taking
Mm,
a shower. So I usually finish a video in the evening and come up with a title for it in the morning.
nice. I might have to try that. Yeah.
Okay, yep. So if you're not subscribed to Michael, yeah, go ahead. And the conversations really are quite interesting. I first encountered Michael on Twitter, and when I did, I was rather excited that he was interested in coming on the show because I have a moral question that I've been wanting to pose, and I've been looking for a philosopher to discuss it with. And here's my moral question. Okay, a lot of people know that I do work as a CAJA, a court-appointed juvenile advocate.
Mhm.
And recently, there is a child that I've been working with that needed to start having visitation with her father. She had not seen her father in 3 years and really didn't hardly remember him. The last time she saw him, she was so young that she could barely remember that. And she was very fearful about going to see him, but her fear really had nothing to do with her father. It had to do with her living situation. She's been in foster care for the last 3 years, and it's the only home where she has ever felt safe. So knowing that her father wants to take her away from this foster home terrified her. And so I was trying to find a way to calm this child and get her to be open to the idea of seeing her father and finding out if reunification with her father was possible. And I was getting nowhere. Both myself and her foster mother, we kept talking about how, the caseworker will be with you the whole time. You will be perfectly safe. Nobody's going to let anything happen to you. But the child was still terrified. So finally, I knew that the child was highly religious because the foster parents are highly religious. And so I alluded to Romans 8:28, which I know is the great comfort of the Christians. And so I said, "Don't you think that maybe somehow everything will work out for the best?" Now, I did not specifically cite the Bible verse. I didn't say anything about God himself. But I knew that that would trigger thoughts of that verse. Now, the child actually didn't think of the verse, but it immediately triggered for the foster mother. And so the foster mother then turned to the child and said, "Yes, if as long as God is here, God will take care of you and God will keep you safe." And I knew that was what was going to happen. And so the question is, was it immoral for me to appeal to a God I do not believe in?
Mhm.
What are your thoughts, Michael?
Um. Well, believe it or not, I don't think that's too complicated of a moral question.
Okay.
I don't think you are in any way, shape, or form morally at fault in that situation. And I say that not based on my own kind of notions of morality, but in ethics, I'll give a little bit of background context,
Okay. Okay.
just really briefly.
Mhm.
So there's three major divisions in ethics. So ethics is a branch of philosophy. Ethics is the branch of philosophy that studies questions of morality, right or wrong. Aristotle framed it as ethics deals with the question, how should I live my life? Um, Three different branches of ethics. Metaethics deals with big picture. Is there such a thing as right or wrong? Is there concrete good and evil in the world? What does that mean? Right? That's metaethics, big picture questions. Um, Normative ethics are different ethical theories.
Okay.
And this is what I want to outline to answer your question specifically.
Okay.
But different ethical theories, the big three, and I'm throwing around a lot of terms. I'm sorry. This is
No, that's
the nature of the
perfectly
beast.
okay.
Yeah. So the big three major ethical theories: deontology, consequentialism or utilitarianism, and virtue ethics.
Okay.
Historically, those are the major ethical theories that are developed. And then the third branch of ethics is what's called applied ethics. And applied ethics deals with specific ethical questions. So what you just gave me is an example of applied ethics,
Okay. Okay.
right? How I make those distinctions because how people answer questions of applied ethics largely depends upon their meta-ethical theories.
Okay. Okay.
So a little bit of a disclaimer. And we can unpack any of that if you want to in me answering this question, but I just wanted to kind of lay some basic groundwork, right?
Okay. Okay.
Um, and by the way, if you or anybody else in the chat has any questions, I'm very one track minded, so it's hard for me to follow chat and talk. So I'm just going to talk to you. But I am a teacher, so if at any point you want to post a question, I'm more than happy to answer it. It won't bother me. Right. So applied ethics is what we're dealing with, and applied ethics deals with, like I said before, concrete ethical questions. So, for example, is it morally acceptable to eat meat? Is it morally acceptable to shop at Walmart? That would be applied ethics. What you just asked me, this particular scenario, most scenarios deal with applied ethics. And the reason why I say that your situation is not, I don't think it's too morally complicated because of those three major ethical theories that I mentioned:
Mhm.
deontology, virtue ethics, consequentialism. Um, Whatever framework we accept, I think we can make a case that what you did is morally permissible.
Okay. Okay.
So across the board, and you don't get that often in philosophy, across the board, I think we can agree that it was okay.
Okay.
The only exception might be deontology, but even then, it might be
Okay. What's deontology?
good. Yeah. Oh, and I forgot. So those are the three categories in philosophy. There's also a fourth category that I would say largely falls in the scope of religion, and that's divine command theory,
Mm.
right?
Yep.
So God commands, tells you what to do about particular moral actions. Um, but that's largely not, I hate to draw such a concrete line between philosophy and religion because in a lot of cases they're not. You don't hear too many philosophers talking about divine command theory unless they're objecting to it. So
Ah. Okay.
I leave that one out.
Okay.
And also conversely, to be fair, a lot of Christians would, or religious people in general, not just Christians, Muslims, Jewish folks, Hindus, would also frame a lot of their conversations within those three different theories I proposed as well. In fact, Hinduism is inherently kind of virtue ethics, and medieval Christianity, especially like Catholicism, is also. I have a puppy, but you might see her jump up in the background. Foster puppy.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. I try to be a good person when I can, but even Christians, right? So most Catholics would be like virtue ethicists because Thomas Aquinas was a virtue ethicist,
Mm,
right?
okay.
So the two are not mutually exclusive. Anyway, I'm sorry for that.
Oh, that's perfectly all right.
Deontology.
Mhm, mhm.
So deontology as a theory, as an ethical framework, argues that decisions, moral decisions that we make, are made with respect to either duties or rights.
Okay.
And as a result, the way that I think about it is deontology is focused a lot on intention,
Okay.
the individual's intent or purpose or rationale for performing the action that they're choosing to perform. I say that deontology might be the only theory that might say that you were in the wrong there, because some versions of deontology tend to be pretty black or white when it comes to certain things. And
Okay.
one of those things has classically been lying,
Okay. Okay.
right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
leaving aside the ontological question of like whether or not God exists, like we don't even have to deal with that.
Mhm. Mhm.
You don't believe that God exists.
Mhm.
I'm assuming because God is
Correct.
Granny. Yeah. Okay. Safe assumption.
Yep.
Uh, you don't believe that this thing is true, yet you're telling it to somebody else, right? So under that kind of basic framework, someone the only way I can think of somebody objecting to what you did is they might argue that you were being dishonest
Right.
or
Exactly.
that you were lying, right?
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
lying, of course, no one accepts lying as morally permissible.
Mhm.
Everybody says lying for the most part is a no-go. But there's always an exception, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, most people allow for exceptions to these general moral guidelines, right?
Like
S-
lying to Nazis about having Jews in your house.
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. Or what we might call like white lies,
Mhm.
small, insignificant lies.
Lying
S-
to someone with Alzheimer's to spare them the pain of going through relearning, that a loved one has died.
Precisely,
Mhm.
precisely. I'm sure if I had a conversation, an individual conversation with everybody in your chat right now and asked them to think of examples of good lies, everybody could probably give me one or two situations in which it would be okay to lie, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
There are some hardline deontologists that would say that the inherent rightness or wrongness of an action is absolute across the board. And this is an extreme deontologist, right? So, is it okay to lie? A very hardline deontologist would say, no, it's never okay to lie in any situation. You look good in that dress as an example of a white lie. I mean, I'm sure that they do, right? But there might be a situation in which we want to say yes when in fact they don't. But we don't have to get into that, right? I'm not here to answer relationship questions or problems. So the primary example of this comes from a German philosopher who for the most part kind of shaped and formed the deontologist branch of ethics, named Immanuel Kant. He was a 19th
Ah,
century German philosopher.
okay.
He writes a book on the metaphysics of morals. Well, he writes a lot of books: Critique of Rationality, Critique of Morals. He was a very I'm talking. You can't growl at me. He's a he's a very prolific author. This might get you more views, so I'll go ahead and this is Nezuko.
Nezuko?
Nezuko, yes, she's our foster puppy.
Hello,
Um,
Nezuko.
she doesn't like it when I don't give her attention, so I have to give her a bone.
That's pretty normal for a dog.
So Immanuel Kant is kind of the quintessential deontologist. Kind of like laid the framework for it, right? And she's up for adoption if anybody is in the Savannah area.
Oh,
Just
okay.
plug. And Immanuel Kant has this phrase that he says that lying is morally impermissible, is morally wrong, because when we lie, we're treating other human beings as a means to an end. We're using those people to get out of them what we want, which is why it's unacceptable. But even Kant makes room for exceptions. And the classic example of this that we have, that's actually was first formulated as an objection to Kant's moral theory, is the situation called the inquiring murderer, which is the exact same as the Nazi at the door. Right? So the situation is, you're at your house one night, you hear a frantic knock at your door, you open up the door, and it's let's say it's a woman who's looks like she's been in a physical altercation and says, somebody's chasing me, can I please hide in your house? And of course, you're a good person, so you say yes. Well, 30 minutes goes by, you get another knock at your door, and it's somebody standing there with a weapon, and they say, have you seen a woman?
This woman.
Yes. This is an objection because in a few places of Kant's work, he explicitly says that lying is impermissible, because he has this thing called the categorical imperative, which is that you should act in such a way that all of your actions become universal laws. Right? So whatever moral decision that I make, I should be comfortable with everybody else on earth making that same moral decision.
Okay.
And because of that, and because of not treating people as a means to an end, Kant says that we should not lie to other people. That it's almost always the case that we should tell people the truth. But even Kant would say there are some exceptions for what he calls white lies. Right? And there are exceptions in this case. Kant, you could read Kant in a way that, I mean, it seems very counterintuitive for us to give away the location of the hiding woman. Most people would find that unacceptable. And a lot of Kant scholars would even say that within Kant's framework, there is permission, space, opportunity to lie under given circumstances, and that would be a circumstance. So I say all that to say that in the situation that you presented us with, I think that even Kant would say, like, yeah, that's acceptable, right? That you're not morally in the wrong for telling this person this. And there's a few reasons for that, right? And I think this entire story that you presented, I mean, it's not a story, it's a real life occurrence, hinges on the fact that this is something that girl accepted. Right? So you're appealing to some common beliefs that she has in order to help her essentially feel better or accept or come to terms with her situation.
What she has to do. Right. Exactly.
Right.
You're triggering some things for me, which is really a good thing. I took Philosophy 101 in my my sophomore year of college, which would have been 1980. And every now and then someone will ask me some philosophical question. I'll say, I don't remember philosophy. That was too long ago. And you're starting to bring a little bit of it back. Those memories are very deep.
Nice.
Okay, so now you mentioned some other moral frameworks. What were
Yeah.
some of the other ones that you mentioned?
Yeah. So in terms of normative ethics, in terms of frameworks, right, we have deontology, which is I
Mhm.
just kind of outlined. Again, the focus for deontology is the will or intent of the individual. So what matters the most for Kant, at least, is why that person is performing that particular action. And then we have this kind of universalizing with the categorical imperative that we should act in such a way that everybody else would do the same sorts of actions that we would do. Um, in contrast to deontology, we have consequentialism or utilitarianism.
Okay. Okay.
All right. And the crux of utilitarianism is that the rightness or wrongness of the action depends upon the consequence of the
Okay.
action.
Depends on what happens afterward, what the
Yes,
result is. Okay.
right.
Okay.
So if deontology is internal, the person's inner drives, motives, beliefs, utilitarianism, consequentialism, I'm just going to use those two interchangeably, is external. The outcome, the consequence, the repercussions of the moral act. Now, there's a couple of different within utilitarianism. There's a couple of different ways that utilitarians frame this. The most popular formulation is the happiness principle,
Okay.
that we should that what determines whether or not something is moral or immoral is how much happiness it produces.
Would you put Sam Harris in that category? Not really? I'm thinking,
I don't
I've read
know.
Sam Harris's The Moral Framework,
Hmm.
and he talks a lot about, promoting human flourishing. And
Yes, yes,
okay. Okay.
yes. He would be a consequentialist of some variety.
Okay.
Um, I'm hesitant to answer that because I've not read that book, so I don't
Ah,
want to
okay.
speak on behalf of Harris. Sam, if you would like to come on my channel, I'm more than happy to talk about it.
Same here, same
Yeah,
here.
I'll give you his contacts once he reaches out. Um, yeah, so one would be the greatest happiness principle, that we should act to produce the greatest amount of happiness for the most amount of people. So if you look at something like murder, for example, um, I guess you can imagine a scenario in which you have like a psychopath or a sociopath that enjoys murdering. That's a weird kind of. My students love to frame questions like this.
David Wood.
Yeah. So that it might make that person happy, but in general, murdering does not make people, especially the person being murdered, is not happy, or their
Right.
family is not happy, right? So it causes a great amount of distress, right? So
Mhm.
murdering would be wrong under kind of the utilitarian framework because you're not causing happiness. The the inverse way of framing that would be the harm principle. You should act to produce the least amount of harm for the most amount of people. Is kind of the negative or the inverse of the happiness principle. But ultimately, utilitarianism, the focus is on the outcome of the action, the consequence of the action, hence the name consequentialism.
Okay.
So deontology, utilitarianism, and then the third big one is virtue ethics. Now, virtue ethics is kind of, I want to say, like the weird cousin. And I say it's weird. It's not really weird. I actually like virtue ethics a lot, but it's weird in the sense because what I'm going to say might sound a little counterintuitive at first. But virtue ethics says that the focus shouldn't be on the individual ethical act. Not to say that individual actions don't matter. It's not what they're trying to say. What they're trying to say is the question of, is this moral, should be reframed as, am I a moral person? Or
What is my character?
yeah.
Mhm, mhm,
Am I acting in such a way to produce good character,
mhm,
to
mhm.
cultivate virtue, to be a moral person? So the emphasis becomes less on specific acts. So you won't, when you're reading a virtue ethicist like Aristotle or in the Eastern tradition Confucius, you're not going to hear a lot of conversation about applied ethics. Rather, the focus is going to be on how the best way to cultivate virtue as a whole is. So for the virtue ethicist, the focus is on the inherent character of the person rather than a specific act. So rather than asking, is murder wrong? The virtue ethicist would ask, am I the sort of person who murders people? So those are the big three in terms of normative ethical theories.
Have you ever seen the movie Broke Down Palace?
I have not. No.
Okay. I paused for just a minute. If you noticed that I muted, it was because I had to look up the name of the movie. I couldn't remember the name of it. It's an excellent movie. And it goes along these lines. It's the story of two young women who go to Thailand. They're either seniors in high school or they've just graduated high school. And there's a young man that puts drugs into their backpack and they get caught. And when they go through their trial, the court isn't so concerned about their actions as their character.
Mm.
And when it becomes obvious that one of them is going to go to the jail, the other one decides to sacrifice herself. And she tells the court, I am of poor moral character. I am a bad person. Send me to jail. She's the good one. Let her go. And the court looks at her sacrifice and says, "You're a good moral person." And it's
Mhm.
a wonderful story of friendship and sacrifice. It's really a good movie. But
Mhm.
anyway, yeah, that's the first thing I thought of when you mentioned that, because that's exactly what the framework of the courtroom was, is
Yeah.
we want to jail people who are of poor moral character.
Right. And to play off that scenario maybe a bit further than it was intended to, um, there's one of my favorite ethicists. His name's Peter Singer.
Mhm.
He's currently alive, hopefully, fingers crossed. Singer's is one of the founders of modern applied ethics, but
Okay.
he has a very famous paper about how, and this is another weird kind of philosophy hot take, but Singer's paper was that most people are forced to or have to make immoral decisions on a regular basis.
Mhm.
Singer's a kind of larger point here is we we as in 21st century Americans have to live and participate within a capitalist framework, and capitalism, according to Singer, is inherently immoral. So we have to, in order to live, to sustain basic sustenance, for example, I might be limited to buying my groceries from a place like Walmart, which perpetuates unethical uh, payment practices, unethical treatment of their workers, and of course the outsourcing of the materials that they're getting to produce oftentimes comes from people that are working in suboptimal or sometimes even within the context of slavery, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
We're forced to kind of participate in this. So for Singer, it's not a matter of like, if we're judging based on individual actions, we all have to make like horrible decisions on a daily basis. Anyway, I that your story kind of reminds me of that. I don't want to get too sidetracked there, but I would highly recommend you check out Peter Singer. By the way, he's also one of the first people to argue for animal
Mm.
rights within
Okay.
applied ethics. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
very interesting thinker overall.
It's been very interesting to watch, Alex O'Connor's journey,
Mm,
into and out of veganism and, the different moral dilemmas that he's gone through in making various decisions that he has for himself. I consider him to be a genius level young man that I expect to be seeing things from him for some time. He's just trying to figure things out at the moment, though.
gotcha.
Okay, I have several comments that I've been holding,
Sure.
till we get, to the end of what we were talking about. First from Mage Grey Wolf. You need to use whatever tools you have available, even if they are illusory.
Mm. Yeah, so that's kind of like a pragmatic approach. If it works, right?
Mhm.
Regardless of the truth or the ontological status of it. Yeah.
Okay, Spaghettiist mentioned to Mark Caesar, reduce harm and promote good. That's the basics of everything for me. So that would be a utilitarian
Yep.
approach.
You are a utilitarian. Congratulations. Yeah.
And Purple Rhymes with Orange says you can't maintain your own absolute morals when dealing with immoral people.
Mm. Yeah. Often, good people are forced to make hard decisions. Yeah. I think that's kind of Singer's general point. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Shadow Kitty says, "What's the use of learning to do right when it's troublesome? To do right ain't no trouble to do wrong, and the wages is just the same." Huck Finn.
Mm. Yeah, because Huck's faced with the dilemma of turning in. I can't remember his name. Is it Jim? Who's the slave? Who's the runaway slave in
Yeah.
the story?
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. And because in the context that he was in, the quote unquote right thing to do would be to turn in the slave. But I think Huck's solution is to say, "Damn it all! I guess I'll go to hell then," and not turn in Jim, right, his friend.
Mhm.
Huck, I think, would be a deontologist, right?
Okay. Okay. And BS Not Accepted says, "How does all this relate to what appears to be moral actions in primates or in very young children?"
Oh boy. Well, it's a fantastic question. I want to draw a distinction between ethics and psychology, first and foremost.
Okay.
I think that's important um, because there are a lot of people out there who want to conflate human action with biological impulses. Um, and we have a lot of like evolutionary psychologists who want to explain human moral decisions based on our evolutionary history. I want to draw a distinction there because in ethics, one of the one of the things that ethics kind of presupposes is this concept of free will. Not to get too controversial here. Um, if we are,
I'm
if
on the fence on free will. I've seen both sides of the fence, and
yeah.
I really don't know which way to go.
Well, so if we are to be considered a moral person, if we are to have the ability to make good or bad decisions, then we have to be able to choose to make those decisions.
Mhm.
And part of the choosing to make those decisions is ethics implies the ability to act against our basic biological impulses
Mhm.
or to make decisions that might contradict our basic biological impulses. And to that extent, ethics isn't reducible to biology or psychology. You might disagree with that. There's a lot of yes. She's looking at the window. I think she saw somebody walk by. So um, there's a lot of biologists, psychologists, and even philosophers who would disagree with that statement. And I'm not saying that I disagree with it or that I agree with it. I'm just kind of giving you the lay of the land. You can make your own decisions when it comes to that. But um, yeah, you get into this question, and this is another question of applied ethics. But some of the things that kind of blurs that boundary would be like questions of addiction, for example, right? Does the addict have a choice whether or not to use? And I'm not in a position to comment on that because I'm not a psychologist.
Okay.
But ethics as a discipline supposes that they do have a choice,
Choice. Okay.
right?
Okay.
Or at least the ability to make the choice.
We have a believer in the chat who says you can't have free will without a soul mind. Now, I would agree with that you can't have free will without a mind. Obviously, you need a mind in order to make a decision, but I don't agree that one needs a soul. And I think you would agree with that as well.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a stereotypical philosopher, but it just depends on what you mean by soul and depends on
Yeah.
what you mean by mind.
Mm, mm,
So I'm a naturalist, so I don't believe in a distinction between mind and brain. So to
mm,
me, if you just want to use the word mind to talk about the mental processes that happen in our brain, like I'm fine with doing that. But and it depends on what you mean by free will. So when I talk about free will, I'm not talking about the medieval conception of free will, in which will was like a thing that happened in the brain, right? That's
mm.
not what I mean. Free will within this context, I'm using in a completely neutral sense. I'm not making any sort of ontological claim about the existence or non-existence of the mind. I don't even think that's necessary for this conversation. So I think if we have a very loose understanding of free will is an ability of human beings to make decision. I don't think that's dependent on mind in a mind as in mind being separate from body or soul. You can have free will, loosely speaking, without having to invoke either one of those.
Mr. Shadow Kitty says soul is just an attitude. Ask any musician.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that. 100%.
Oh. Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier, and this isn't really a question for you. This is just a rhetorical question, but
Mhm.
I was thinking about this today is if souls exist, how do humans get souls? Does God infuse them into a zygote at the moment of conception? Are there
Mm.
souls just sitting in heaven that God grabs one and puts it into a human when they get born?
There's a lot of questions when it
Mm,
comes to souls.
yes.
Yes.
Okay. I have another direction that we could go, but I think you had some specific things that you wanted to discuss. So let's go there first.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm happy to answer the question. I mean, it's your show, so you're more than welcome to just ask me.
Well, the big question I have is I had a couple of people ask me, are you a moral realist, a moral
Yeah.
anti-realist?
Hmm.
And I started looking up the definitions, and about 3 paragraphs in, I'm going, I don't know how to apply this.
Well, see,
And
that's
so
the
I couldn't
direction I want.
answer the
Yeah.
question.
No, it's that's the direction I wanted to head in.
Oh,
So yeah, it's
perfect,
perfect.
perfect.
Yeah, man. So this is a lot of what I'm going to say might sound very pedantic and very superficial, and I don't want to turn people off from studying or learning about ethics because let me say this before I get into the realism, anti-realism, right?
Okay,
Um, Ethics is without a doubt like the most practical branch of philosophy,
okay.
period. And it's not even the branch of philosophy that I study as an academic.
Mm,
I study the history and philosophy of science.
okay.
Is kind of my cup of tea, specifically the reception of relativity in early 20th century France.
Mm,
But philosophy of time is super abstract,
mhm,
and not many people can relate to it. But ethics is one of those things that I think everybody can relate to,
mhm.
because literally every single person who's listening to this and will listen to this and who has ever listened, that does make sense. Any person who will ever listen to this will make ethical decisions on a daily basis. Ethics happens every single day, multiple times a day. We're all confronted with ethical choices. I say that to say that the next part of this discussion is going to be more abstract.
Okay.
And probably won't be that applicable to the lives of most people that are listening to this. So apologies in advance. Okay. So this question of realism, of moral realism, is falls under that umbrella of metaethics. That's one of those big first questions that we ask. And it's called metaethics because this relates to a different branch of philosophy called metaphysics, right? Metaphysics deals with questions of reality. What exists, what doesn't exist.
Okay.
So we talked about souls earlier. We talked about God earlier. That's metaphysical questions. Metaphysics asks the question, what is and what is not? And one of those big metaphysical questions is, does morality exist? There's a lot to unpack with that question because it hinges largely on what we mean by existence.
Yeah.
And
I did
so
a debate on that once where I took a position I did not agree with, and I didn't do all that well because I was trying to argue that God exists because the idea exists, and the existence of an idea is an existence.
kind of ontological argument, so to speak. Yeah.
Anyway, so go ahead.
No. So yeah, does morality exist? Or so the moral realist, so keep that question at the back of your head. So moral realism, just super simple, is the belief that moral facts exist. Moral
Okay.
facts are real, as opposed to moral anti-realism, which says that in one form or another that morality is a matter of convention or culture.
Okay.
Which would imply that moral facts are not concrete, universal, that moral facts, moral sentiments change with geographical location, temporal place, when in history we're talking about. So the ancient Greeks had a different morality system than we do, and that morality is in some way, shape, or form subjective or relative. Moral realism is the opposite claim, that moral facts exist and that moral facts transcend time, in the sense that what is a moral fact for ancient Greece would also be a moral fact for us today. And place, in the sense that what's a moral fact for me would that same fact would be applicable to somebody in China.
Okay.
So that's moral realism.
Okay.
All right, so back to this question of existence. What does it mean for something to exist? There are two types of moral realist: naturalist and supernaturalist.
Okay.
So a moral realist who's a naturalist would be Sam Harris.
Okay.
So moral facts exist, and Sam Harris would say that morality is objective, right? But what Sam Harris means by objectivity is that it's applicable to all humans. A supernaturalist, a moral realist who's a supernaturalist, would say that morality is founded in a reality outside of the natural. So that might sound like a whole lot of mumbo jumbo. So let me clarify that a little bit.
Go ahead. Although actually not really, because I'm thinking in terms of what one of the things that has caused me to be confused on this is because I got into a discussion with someone, and one of the things we were talking about is slavery.
Mm,
And they asked me, clearly there was a time when slavery was morally acceptable. I mean, not that it was morally acceptable, but people believed it was morally acceptable.
historically, yeah.
And so am I of the position that it has always been wrong? And yes, I do believe it has always been wrong. Well, then why didn't people understand that? And I think it's because our understanding of what is moral and what is immoral changes with our culture and
Hmm.
with our growing as human beings. And I think there are things that we accept today that 100 years from now, people may be looking back at us and saying, "You guys were such idiots that you didn't get that this was immoral." And so from that standpoint, I'm thinking, okay, I guess I'm a moral realist. I guess I think that there really are moral facts, but I don't believe that they are completely discoverable.
Mm. You would be in an interesting position then. I don't.
I think
uh,
that the human journey is the discovery of these moral facts.
okay. My question to you would be, and I don't think you necessarily have to have an answer to this, but it's something to think about. Would it be possible for people in the past to have discovered these facts?
Yes, it would be
Okay,
possible. Mhm.
then you would be a moral realist. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I think so. I think so. I don't want to tell you what you are, but
No,
yeah.
that's perfectly okay.
I think you would be a moral realist in that sense. So, and this sounds weird, and I don't want to, sound like I'm smoking something that's not legal in the state that I live in. But there are different types of reality. So there's the there's the basic material reality, right? Concrete. I'm at my desk right now. This is real, right? That material reality is a facet of reality.
Mhm,
It's obvious to most people that when we say that morality exists, we don't mean that moral claims exist materially,
mhm,
right? In the same way that we might say that mathematics is exist, but you don't go on a walk through the woods and bump into oneness, right?
mhm, mhm,
So we might say that morality is in a similar boat than that. So you have material reality, you have cognitive reality, the reality of our conscious experience, and the weird kind of malleable, tricky sort of reality is social reality. So there are certain facts which exist socially, like money would be the biggest one, right? Money exists materially, of course, in the form of like bills and coins, but the meaning of money is a social reality. It's a construct, right? That we all agree upon that it's real. So for the moral realist who is a naturalist, they might say that morality is objective and that the objectiveness of reality is founded in the fact that this is something that human beings as a whole can agree on. But that objectivity does not transcend humanity.
mhm.
If that makes sense. The supernaturalist would say that it transcends humanity.
Mm, mhm, mhm.
Um, and you have a supernaturalist who might say that morality is founded in God,
A
for
god,
example,
yeah.
or like Plato, who argued that morality is founded in the perfect forms
Mm,
that
m'kay.
exist outside of material reality, but that give meaning to material reality. So the I say that to say that somebody like Sam Harris can be a moral realist, but Sam Harris is an atheist, but also somebody like William Lane Craig can be a moral realist,
Mhm.
although they disagree on some very basic stuff, right?
Right,
They could
right.
still agree on morality.
Mhm. Okay, Mark Caesar had a really good question. What morals do we have today that in the future will be looked at as immoral? And I don't know for sure, but a big one that I think will be is our justice system.
Ooh.
Our justice system is horrible, and the way that we treat criminals is horrible. We, especially here in the South, the idea is we need to punish these people. Not we need to rehabilitate these people. We need to help these people function in society. No, it's we need to punish these people. And I think that is going to be an idea that at one day is going to become outmoded.
I hope so.
And then Justa says everyone is born with basic moral understanding. What is your thoughts on that, Michael?
Well, justice. Um, you would be in good company. I think Plato would agree with you. Plato believed that we were all born with innate knowledge of the forms. Other philosophers like John Locke have argued that we're born with certain basic innate concepts. Um, I think that I would say that morality is predicated on a sense of reason, rationality, and that for me, rationality is something that's learned. It's not something that I mean, we're born with basic survival instinct, yes, but nobody's born with like an ability to balance their finances, right? That's something we have
Have
to
to
come
learn.
to be
Yeah.
taught. So there are some philosophers that would agree with that. I am not among those, though. Not to say that you're wrong, just me personally.
BS Not Accepted asks, can non-human animals be moral agents? I believe they can. I
Mhm,
absolutely believe they can.
mhm. There's a very strong case that they can because my question would be like, what gives the capability of morality? And it seems like the answer to that question would be consciousness of some variety.
Hmm.
And if you agree that non-humans can be conscious, are conscious in the case of certain animals, then they probably are able to make moral decisions.
Hmm.
And if you want to get real sci-fi, then there might be other non-human life forms out there that have some level of consciousness and some ability of what looks like reason, and they would be moral agents as well.
Sandy asks, are we born with survival instincts? How a baby can't defend itself? I think everything is taught, nothing is innate.
Mm. Yeah, Sandy, I let me clarify what I meant by survival instincts. I just meant our want and desire to like eat food and drink water, right? Or drink anything, maybe not necessarily water. Yeah, I don't think a baby's born with sophisticated survival instincts, but the desire to live.
Hmm.
Broad, loosely speaking. Yeah, don't take what I say there with a grain of salt. Again, not a biologist or psychologist. So yeah.
Hmm. Okay, we are getting to the end of our time, and so I did have some other topics I wanted to get into a little bit, but we're close to the end. Is there anything else, Michael, that you would like to discuss that we may have missed on, or something you want to expand on at all?
Um, Not specifically. I would just say that if you're interested in these ideas, if you're interested in learning about ethics, absolutely fantastic resource that's free, available to anyone with internet access is the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
That's where I'm usually getting most of my philosophy. Mhm. Mhm.
Fantastic resource. I really like it because it's written by professional philosophers. These are people who have PhDs in the fields and who are experts in the article that they're writing about. So I can't recommend that enough. Another one is the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Mm.
Same sort of situation, also written by professional philosophers with backgrounds in what they're writing about. There's a couple of good YouTube channels out there, but those sites would be my go-to recommendations.
Okay. Um BS not accepted brings up a good point. Even young children have a sense of fairness, even children who can't talk yet. Yeah. I was absolutely fascinated recently when I saw the monkey study where the monkey was given the cucumber and was fine with receiving a cucumber for a task, but then when his neighbor got a grape for the same task, suddenly the monkey was no longer happy with the cucumber. And the sense of fairness. And I was arguing this with someone on Twitter just yesterday
Mm.
who was trying to tell me that no, animals have no consciousness. They cannot make decisions. Everything that they do is pure instinct. And the only reason the monkey rejected the cucumber was pure instinct and conditioning. And everything that animals do in a lab is conditioning. And it was a weird discussion because I got absolutely nowhere with this guy.
That's a hard position to take. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. What really got weird was when he made the claim that if you put a rat in a maze,
Hmm.
the rat's decision to go right or left before it's ever been trained to run the maze is completely random, just like putting gas in the maze and whether the gas goes right or left. I thought, wow, that's really a weird position that animals have no brains, have no that they act purely on instinct.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if you're talking about like a mollusk or a clam, but like a chimpanzee, come on.
Yeah.
Those are some smart animals.
Yeah. Okay, what do you have coming up on your channel that we can look forward to?
Um, I have a couple of projects that I'm working on. I've in the past I taught a class on conspiracy theories. I got a collaborative conspiracy theory video project that is coming out hopefully soon. That going to have some contributors from the community. David McDonald from Deep Drinks. Shout out David. Maya. Um, I can't remember. He goes by Dr. Topeka Weasel. I'm sorry. I can't remember your Dr. Topeka Weasel.
Okay.
I've got some collaborators. We're going to be talking about some zany conspiracy theories. I got a short video on Atlantis. Plato's Atlantis. Plato wrote about Atlantis as a metaphor, as a myth, but we've misinterpreted that over time. Yeah, that's and I think that's. Oh, I'm interviewing Majesty of Reason in a
Oh,
couple of
okay.
weeks. Yes, Tapioca
And
Weasel.
yours says it's Dr. Tapioca Weasel.
Yes, yes. He's a great guy. I've interviewed him. The interview's on my channel. We talk about history of physics, his family's involvement in physics. It's good stuff.
I'm not familiar with him. I'll have to go over and meet him.
He's a fantastic person. Yeah.
Okay. All right, on my channel, the video that I just put out this week is a video that was made for kids, and it was made primarily for my grandson, and it doesn't have a lot of views because the algorithm isn't going to promote it as much, partly because there is no chat or there's no comments. You can't comment on children's videos. So if you have not seen that video, it's only 11 minutes long. If you don't mind, give it a view or two or three to boost the algorithm a bit because that one's not getting as much attention as usual. And next week, I have Dr. Richard Carrier coming back. And Atheist Edge is going to be co hosting. Dr. Carrier only has 30 minutes. So he will only be here for the first half of the show. And if anyone has comments, I'm going to hold all of the comments to the end and you discuss them after Dr. Carrier is gone because we only get him for 30 minutes. But I will take questions for Dr. Carrier during the time that he's there. So come back next week and we will have Dr. Carrier back. And thank you so much for coming, Michael. This
Thanks
has
for
been
having me.
really educational for me. I really appreciate your coming.
I appreciate you hosting me, your kindness and generosity. Thank you for having me.
Okay, and so to everyone out there who is watching in the chat and in the future, and to Michael, live your life.